Who are we talking about next, Vern?
That would be Joseph Warren. He is somebody that if you grew up in New England, in Boston, you'd know about, but there's a large part of the American public that just doesn't know much about him. And once again, in our four-part Lexington Concord series, you saw him being part of that history. But now we're asking the question is, who is this guy?
I have no idea who Joseph Warren is.
Well, Warren, at age 14, goes to Harvard.
Whoa.
Yes. And he is pursuing medical studies, but then just a short while into his studies, his father falls off a ladder, hits his head, and dies. He's a very promising young man, and so family, friends help him to continue his medical studies.
Wow.
They
must have seen something in him worth investing in.
Intelligent, very compassionate, engaged in everything. He was, and he, when he has passions, he pursues them. So he's, part of the studies was the play Cato, about a general during classical times. He was so taken by it that he convinced the other guys in the dorm to do the play Cato in his dorm room. And he, they dressed up and had all the parts and read it and did that. And so, I mean, how unusual. But
exactly.
He was so taken by the play. Do you know who else liked Cato?
No.
Who else, well, I'll give you a hint, wanted everybody to see the play Cato when they were bivouacked at Valley Forge?
George Washington?
George Washington.
George Washington was taken with Cato.
Cato.
What does Cato talk about? I mean, I don't even know the play.
Republican virtue.
Oh.
A general that led and won and then left his position and went back to his farm. Do you know of anybody else that did that?
No, George.
George. It's tied together here,
and
isn't
Joseph Warren is also taken with this.
Republican virtue, giving to the people more than you keep yourselves, willing to sacrifice.
Because, a 16-year-old. Rather, I mean, his dad has died, and he started when he was 14. So I'm guessing he's just a couple of years before his dad died. Rather, he says, Republican. Let's think of the virtues. Let's play this play, gentlemen. And he got his dorm to do it. Now what happens with him?
Well, he graduates at age 23. He is in Boston. He's a doctor. He inoculates 1/3 of Boston against smallpox.
I didn't know they inoculated.
Yes. Paul Revere was one of the people that he inoculated.
Amazing.
He had that type of heart that he wanted to give of himself to the greater good, Republican virtue.
Was inoculation a standard thing?
No, it wasn't.
So he's like on the cutting edge of medical discoveries, and he convinces 1/3 of Boston, you're going to let me give you some smallpox so you don't get smallpox.
Yeah.
And Paul Revere's one of them, so he must have trusted Joseph Warren. 23 years old.
Yeah. He's a quite young man now. I don't know if it was he himself or he was part of a group of physicians that did that.
Exactly, but that's amazing.
Yeah.
So now what happens with him? He's inoculated Boston. He's a well-known and well-liked young man who spent at least 7 years at Harvard. Now what?
What occurs is he continues to be involved medically in Boston, and there were groups of people in Boston that could not afford his services, but he gave them anyway. Okay. And
respect that.
Yeah. And even to those that you'd want to stay away from, they're prostitutes. He treated them free of charge.
Wow.
He still had medical debts, but he not only treated them, but would spend his money for whatever medicines were necessary for the poor, the destitute, orphans, kids, just street kids. He had that type of compassionate heart for Boston, so that when the Stamp Act, the Sugar Act, the other acts were ramping up, he became involved in the effort against oppression and tyranny. So we got to know the Sons of Liberty. He was a Mason. Revere was one of his Masonic brothers. He became part of the Sons of Liberty. And then when Sam Adams and when John Hancock were declared traitors by Parliament and the Crown, they went up to Lexington, but he stayed there because he had been involved with the Sons of Liberty. He occupied their position, was head of the Committee of Safety.
Joseph Warren.
Joseph Warren was.
The young doctor.
The young doctor. Now he's,
steps into the hole
yeah,
and says, I'm going to help.
but he's in his 30s now, early 30s.
All right.
Okay, so he's
that helps.
older.
Thank you.
Yeah.
All right, I'm getting it now.
And so not only Committee of Safety, but also Committee of Correspondence, who sent Revere on his rides. Committee of Safety is, another aspect of what he was doing. And so during the Lexington Concord videos, we know he had a spy ring watching the British and their movements so that he could alert Revere to go out, and then also Dawes there. That was on April 19th in the Lexington Concord thing. So he was very, very involved in that. Also in 74, when the Governor Hutchinson disbanded the colonial representative body, they formed a provincial government.
And Joseph Warren was part of that?
He was part of the provincial government too.
That's dangerous.
Yeah, so he continues to move up in the leadership there alongside Hancock
and John Adams.
Or Sam Adams.
Sam Adams.
But you don't hear a lot about him from all the way
I
from...
still never heard of him.
Yeah, but he was so integral in that. And so April 19th, 1775, that's when we see him primarily in that history, and we ask the question, who is this man? And so these things are coming up, but there's more to his story.
So what else about Joseph Warren?
Well, during this time too, now the Boston Massacre, March 1770, Okay. And Boston said they want to commemorate this every year. And so 2 years later, 1772, he is the speaker that addresses the crowd at the old South Church. And it's in the middle of a blizzard, but 4,000 people crowd in to hear his oratory. And he said...
Boy, is he putting a target on his back.
Yeah, but the big target comes a little bit later. And he's admonishing them to, act worthy of yourself. Don't devolve into pettiness, but worthy of yourself, Republican value. And so...
Like Cato.
Like Cato, yeah. But then, 3 years later, in March of 1775, they're going to commemorate the 5th year of the Boston Massacre, but the British officers are saying, well, whoever goes up there, we're going to kill him. And Warren steps up and says, put me up there. Put me up there. And so...
I am amazed.
Yeah, he has no fear. He declared to his mother later on, I am not afraid to die.
He says, put me up there.
Put me up there. So people...
Does he go up?
Crowd, yes. People crowd in. British officers want to come in. And the Sons of Liberty make sure they're up front in the front pews, and they want to sit next to them with the British officers. And if any hanky-panky goes on, they want to be there.
This is inside of a church?
This is inside, yeah. And so Warren gets there, and it's so packed, he can't get in. And so they go around to the back, they come in a back window, and then he enters into the pulpit, and he has a toga on. This is part
like the dorm. This is good.
Isn't that fantastic?
Here's these British officers with their pistols waiting. Who's going to be up there? Who's going to be up there? And they can't see anybody coming through the door. And all of a sudden, boom!
Yeah.
Joseph Warren in a toga. Now you got me. What's happening now?
And so now he reminds the people of how they came over here, what they were looking for, and admonishes them to keep pursuing what they are pursuing, even though there's this oppression and tyranny and what have you.
What were Americans looking for? Or I should say British citizens looking for when they came over? What did he remind them of?
The sacrifices of their parents, their grandparents coming over for freedom, and the ability to increase their economic status, to own their own land, to have their own business, whatever crops they raise, they're able to retain them. They don't, whatever sheep or horses or cattle, they can retain them and they can sell them and keep the money rather than giving 90% to who the landowner is. So, as well as the religious liberties too. And of course, then there are the fortune hunters as well there. But, these are the two primary reasons, economic, religious, or religious, economic, however you want to put that, and reminding them of that.
Do you think the audience, when they see him in a toga, they're making that association that we think he's trying to get them to make?
I have no idea how they responded. It was so packed with emotions.
Oh, yeah.
One of the officers, as Warren is speaking, holds up a handful of bullets or musket balls, and showing him, and
shows it to Warren.
Warren, who's up there in the pulpit, goes from now. Now, is that apocryphal? Did that really happen or not? Some of the
makes
stuff.
for a great story,
doesn't it? And that's why I'm telling.
I love it.
And so that was.
So they arrest him.
No, he's not arrested, but it was still a coming together. So that is a little bit more about his character. Who
amazing.
Is Joseph Warren? All of a sudden, this guy. But we're not done yet.
Was Joseph Warren trying to inflame this crowd to violence and to rise up against the oppression? What was he trying to do with this toga thing?
In researching this, his goal was always talking about the greater good, the greater cause, back to Republican values, and where the people, through the characteristic of virtue, would always give to the country. If it's a church, give to the church, or if it is Masonic, give to that, or maybe it is that we make ropes or build ships. There is a greater organization that you give your talents to, and that's what he was emulating. But the opposite is that, well, it's all about me, or it's all about this organization, or things that divide, and he's calling them to a greater good, okay? So that if we have unity, if we stick together, we can do this. If we divide, then we won't, because we're fighting the strongest nation with the biggest navy, most powerful army in the world, or at least the European world. And so, so we need to remain united. And so that's what he, as well as George Washington, keeps focusing in on. And so that brings us to the point where the next thing in his life is Bunker Hill.
He goes to Bunker Hill?
Oh,
a doctor?
Oh, yes.
Now, Bunker Hill is a trap.
Well, as we are moving to Bunker Hill, how things develop there is that, of course, the British are here on Boston, on the island. Across the waterway is Charleston and Breed's Hill and Bunker's Hill, and there's a back bay right here. And so there's a little isthmus that if soldiers wanted to march out of Boston, they'd have to go down and around through Roxbury, Cambridge, and up here, or if they just took boats and went across, which of course the British Navy could protect them there. But this Breed's Hill, if you have an artillery battery there,
it could have influence on Boston.
Yes.
Because it's right there.
Yeah. And then Dorchester Heights is down here on the east side over another body of water. And so that's Bunker Hill. Now Warren, now we're talking June 17th, 1775. And so this is...
So just 2 months after Lexington and Concord.
Right. That Warren is now elected a major general in the militia.
Whoa.
Okay.
That's obviously they really respect him.
They really respect him, but they are now moving troops onto Bunker Hill, and he is said, well, we want you to lead this. And he says, well, no, I don't want to lead this because that means that as a major general, I'm not up front. I want to be up front. I want to be with the troops
in
up
the
front.
trenches.
He wants to be in the trenches. Okay, so he waives this and says, I'm not going to do that. The troops have already moved down the little isthmus to the landmass where
and are digging in, probably.
They're digging in, but you've got Bunker Hill that's 110 feet high. Then you have Breed's Hill, which is down farther. It's about 80 feet high, and then that goes down to the water there.
The water, Breed's Hill, Bunker Hill, and he's on Bunker Hill?
Well, he's not there yet.
Oh, okay.
Israel Putnam's there, another group of men as well as another gentleman that has gone past Bunker Hill and is digging in on Breed's Hill and with the trenches there.
All right.
So he's late to the game there. I think he had maybe a major headache there, and he puts on his Sunday best. And he walks from Cambridge, walks across the isthmus, borrows, a musket, black powder as well as cartridges. He's in his Sunday best.
Why?
Because he is going to the front to fight. He wants to be part of this effort
for a republic.
Yeah. And so as one of the men, not as a major general that sits back in a tent, but to be with the men, to be part of that. And so he walks. Now Israel Putnam, now we haven't talked about Bunker Hill yet.
We haven't,
That's going to be another 4-part series.
Oh, I really want to hear about that one. Okay.
But Putnam is on Bunker Hill, and there are quite a few men there that are not down at Breed's Hill.
Where does Warren go?
Warren walks right by Putnam and goes to join William Prescott, the commander there, that has built the trenches and a redoubt and everything. No relationship to Samuel Prescott.
Okay.
Okay, so William Prescott, Sunday best, and I don't know if anybody on Bunker Hill falls him down there. These guys, if they would have followed him down
at Breed's Hill,
there may have been a different outcome. We don't know that. But he comes down there in his Sunday best and joins
the very front line.
The very front line.
Right in front of the beach where they're going to land.
Yeah, the beach. The hill going up to Breed's Hill, the British, attacking 3 times, once repelled, second repelled, third time they make it up. Now,
so we're at Breed's Hill. He's in his Sunday best.
Yeah.
He's got a musket.
Yes.
Does he survive this?
Well, he's in the trenches. And then above the trenches is a redoubt that they have dug around there. The British attack one time, they repel them. A second time they are repelled. And then a third time they've run out of black powder. Mm-hmm. So there are a lot of guys there, and they haven't had a lot of wounds or deaths because they occupy the high ground, even though thousands of British are attacking up the hill. But they run out of black powder. And now they are starting to come out of the trenches and start to go up to Bunker Hill. And Warren stays there
Down below.
in the trenches to cover their retreat and doing what he can. And then gradually they need to leave too. And there are guys in the redoubt that are starting to go out, and he is providing cover, and he's recognized, at least that's what the documents say, by somebody that had been there March 5th, 1775, and seen him given the
Toga speech.
The Toga speech. He was recognized, and as I understand, he was shot in the eye and died. But that's not the end of the story.
No.
9 months later, the British leave Boston. His brother and others look for his body. But
You mean they just left the bodies?
They left the bodies.
That's cold.
They buried them, but in unmarked.
Right, they just put them back in the trenches and buried them.
Buried him with disease, and they go up there and they look for the body, and they find this one grave of 2 bodies in there, and it's been 9 months, so you can't recognize the face.
Yeah.
It is, but Revere, in order to make ends meet in a down economy, he learned a little something about dentistry, and he was able to put a denture or a tooth in Warren's mouth with certain wire supplements. He recognized the wire that he placed in Warren, so they did find the body.
Warren, who sent out Paul Revere on his journey just 2 months before, now Paul Revere sees his handwork and identifies the body.
Yeah. And so then they give him a proper burial at that point. So Joseph Warren was equally an inspiring person that looked to Republican values. Some people say that if we didn't have a George Washington, we would have a Joseph Warren. And that's the backstory on Joseph Warren.
What a story.